national platforms as part of this meeting of the foreign ministers in accordance with the plan of consultations for 2024. We mentioned that the plan was completely put into practice, and during all these meetings we managed to agree on various matters and to coordinate our actions in OSCE, in the UN, and other multilateral platforms. And everyone mentioned how important it is to prepare for the 80th anniversary of Victory in Get Patriotic War events on May 9th. We will be happy to see our friends from the CIS states at the events, at the celebrations in Moscow that will be devoted to this milestone date, milestone anniversary. All the leaders of the CIS countries received an invitation from President Putin to participate in the parade and other events in Moscow. And we look forward to seeing all of them there with us on the Red Square. And today we made a decision in this regard. We made a decision on introduction of a new title in the CIS, a city of the labor glory, 1941-1945. This decision has been made. These honorary titles will be awarded to certain cities. We are currently working on the list of such cities, and in the near future we will publish this information. Of course, we also discussed various international and regional affairs. I shared information about the current state of affairs around the Ukrainian crisis. I mentioned our consistent line aimed at settlement that must be durable, that must be resilient, and it can only be done based on the elimination of the root causes of this conflict. And everyone is well aware of these root causes. They've been accumulating for years, and basically they have started forming when NATO made a decision to enlarge, to expand towards our borders, and when they started to encourage blatantly Nazi Kiev regime that took power as the result of anti-constitutional bloody coup d'etat, and among its goals, it had to legally eradicate everything that has to do with Russia and the Russian world. So I'm speaking about the language, about the culture, about orthodoxy, canonical Russian orthodoxy, and many other things related to Russia. We spoke with my other counterparts. I told them about our contacts with Americans at various levels, and I told them about our context regarding the facilitation from Washington to settle the Ukrainian crisis. President Trump has been consistently showing interest in this regard, and unlike Europe, and by Europe I mean the UK as well, who are absolutely ignoring the root causes of this situation, in the United States they have this willingness to understand the root cause of the problem. And President Trump on many occasions publicly said that it was a mistake to drag NATO into this matter. I think it played a decisive role in the current events. Despite many years of warnings from Moscow, they understand also that going back to the borders of 1991, something that Zelensky demands, is impossible because its population, Zelensky called them species. He said that on many occasions, even before the special military operation. And he advised these people, if they believe they're part of the Russian culture, they must get out to Russia. These were his statements that he made before the special military operation. And now in one of his interviews, he said that he is driven, first of all, by his hatred towards Russians. And he was asked, are you speaking about President Putin? No, I'm speaking about all Russians. I hate them. So how can you even hypothetically think of giving him all these people? It will never happen. And Trump's administration understands this, and many times publicly they were saying that Zelensky will have to accept the territorial losses as well. After today's meeting, a number of decisions were made in cultural, humanitarian, and law enforcement fields, and also in the field of security. We approved a number of international draft projects, in particular cooperation between the CIS states in enhancing border security for 2026-2030. I would also like to highlight the document on the main areas of united control system for radiation, chemical, and biological situation, and also on the principles of joint communication systems of the CIS armed forces, and also on the initiative of President of Kazakhstan, Forum of Volunteers. It is going to become a platform within the CIS. We have supported this suggestion for many years. We have been developing this movement, and we are all for making it international, making it work within the Commonwealth of Independent States. So, and number of documents, we are going to publish them as the Foreign Ministry of Russia, and other draft documents will be signed by the heads of governments during their sessions. There are going to be 2 such meetings in June and September, and some of the documents will be signed in Dushanbe on December 10th. It will be signed by the heads of state. Now I'm ready to take your questions. Minister Lavrov, how do you see the role of the CIS in the multipolar world? Well, in principle, I think we're giving a detailed explanation of our position. The President came up with the initiative of forming the Eurasian security architecture that would grasp the entire Eurasian continent, all the countries located on the continent, and all the organizations that exist on the continent. CIS is one of such organizations. It established working ties with the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, with the Eurasian Economic Union, with CSTO, with ASEAN. There is also ASEAN in this space, and there is a group. Well, it's rather Persian Gulf Cooperation Council states in South Asia. There are other integrational groupings and organizations, and the very idea is that all these sprouts of integrational processes, so largely they're well known in many cases, so they must communicate with each other, cooperate with each other. They need to look for coinciding interests, joint efforts, not to waste any resources on doing the same things. And CIS is an organization that is involved in the economy, in the matters of security. It can and it will, for sure, be an active partner in the efforts on forming tangible material ties. That's something that President Putin is calling the creation of the large, greater Eurasian partnership. And this material foundation, of course, it will help to establish Eurasian security architecture, and this CIS is going to be part of this process, considering the important dimension, security dimension, that this organization has. And as for the fact that the Eurasian continent is going to be a source of a number of processes, and maybe is going to lead these processes to strengthen multipolarity, I have no doubt regarding this. 2 weeks ago, Callas admitted that anti-Russian sanctions are harming the economies of Central Asian states, but she asked them to bear with it. After this press conference, you're going to meet Central Asian foreign ministers. What kind of advice would you give to them in response to the statement by Kallis? Well, the only advice I can give to them to bear with Kallis, who is currently holding this office, than to bear something to damage the interests of their own nations and peoples. I do not understand these politicians, honestly. But the most ridiculous thing that Kallis did not say that Estonia and other European Union nations have to bear with it, have to suffer from it, and they lose much more from the sanctions policies they introduce than what Central Asian countries and other CIS states lose from these sanctions. And another lady, Annalena Baerbock, who is currently finishing her work as a foreign minister of Germany. He is famous for many things, including being incompetent in her role, but mostly due to the lack of any responsibility before the people. And like Ursula von der Leyen, Annalena Baerbock, she spoke about Germans along with Scholz. She said that, yes, we are making things worse for our population, but for the sake of victory over Russia, our people, they need to bear with it. And Ursula von der Leyen basically said something along the same lines in regards of the entire European Union. So they do not think about the people who voted for them. They only think about how other countries need to suffer just to punish Russia. I think it clearly shows to what extent the European Union degraded as an idea that was implemented in the interest of social and economic prosperity of its citizens, of the citizens of these countries. Minister Lavrov, could you please say, considering the trade wars that are ongoing today, such organizations as the CIS or Russia plus Central Asia states, can they come up with some new measures to minimize the economic damage? Did you discuss it today? Well, of course, we spoke about these matters as well, but in practical dimension, they are considered by the central banks or financial ministries or the deputy prime ministers. They discuss these matters at their level. Well, we don't have to invent anything in this regard, because for 3 years the West has been trying to internationalize their sanctions, to make them international, and to impose them on everyone who is cooperating with Russia in any way or interacting with Russia. First of all, against our neighbors in Central Asia. As for the CIS states, overall, the trade turnover is carried out in national currencies, 85% of this. And with China, this number is bigger. With India, this number is a little bit smaller, but these indicators are growing. So despite the sanctions, and apart from the national currencies, there is a chance to establish platforms that would be independent from external pressure, and one of the options, the financial messaging that the Russian Central Bank came up with, it's a very convenient system. It does not depend on any SWIFTs, and there are some other initiatives, and in particular, they are being considered within BRICS, where Brazil suggested, and now we are working on this, Brazil suggested thinking on alternative payment platforms. And I hope that countries that are not even part of BRICS, they will have access to these mechanisms when they will emerge. Despite the sanctions, trade within the CIS grew by almost 4.5% last year. Industrial production also increased by the same amount, and if we compare it with the state of the European economy, we can see really positive outcomes. So we will continue to think about our national interest and our partners, and also yesterday during bilateral talks with the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Kazakhstan, Deputy Prime Minister Murat Nurtlev, he also reiterated that our partners, they also keep their national interests in mind. And if a number of private companies, of banks, they might be afraid of secondary sanctions because it can damage their interests, it is also clear that the benefits that Central Asian states receive from joint projects, from trading with Russia, from the investment activities, Russia's investments into their countries, there is no doubt that it's bigger, that it's more significant for their national interests than those largely promises that are offered by the Western countries when they ask them to ensure sanctions. Yesterday in the morning, against the backdrop of Russian-American talks in Istanbul, there was a prisoner swap. Who initiated this swap, and how important is that step to normalize relations? So this suggestion came from both sides simultaneously. I'm sure that any humanitarian act, even if we're speaking about two people rejoining their families, it's always a positive thing. The politics must be aimed at doing something useful, something that will make life better for people. And this was already a second swap like this over the last few weeks. And I believe it helps to strengthen trust that is so vital. But it will take a lot of time to restore it because it was undermined, it was destroyed by Biden's administration. And now in the United States, both among Democrats and among Republicans, there are a lot of people who wouldn't want to see the President Trump's willingness to restore dialogue, to normalize relations. They don't want this approach to prevail. So we will think about our national interests firmly, our contacts with Trump's team, in particular summit in Riyadh with Secretary of State Rubio and with the National Security Advisor Waltz. These meetings showed that there is a basic understanding of the need of maintaining dialogue. Of course, when both parties think about their national interests, first of all. So this understanding exists. This kind of approach is feasible. It is possible. And we have an example when People's Republic of China and the United States, they are entering very exacerbated period considering these tariffs and so on. Not only tariffs, and there are still issues regarding status of Taiwan. The West recognizes Taiwan as part of one China. But on the other hand, they are shaking their finger at China and they're saying that don't change status quo. And status quo is not one China policy. Basically, not even a quasi-state. They see Taiwan, they see the status quo is the statehood of Taiwan. Then there is a problem with the South China Sea. So there are some issues. And it's not for nothing that in Washington and in NATO, they mentioned China is the biggest systemic challenge after eliminating the Russian threat. And despite all this, despite exchanging these statements, quote-unquote polite statements between Beijing and Washington, they have never ceased maintaining this dialogue. So it's absolutely not clear why Biden's administration all of a sudden decided to behave the way they behaved. And I believe we do not get too complacent, but it should be the goal to normalize the relations and recognition for the national interest of both countries. I believe this is feasible. This is something that needs to be done. Is there an agreement to restore direct flights between Russia and the United States? And will it also help to lift sanctions from Aeroflot? Well, it will not help to lift sanctions. It will be a consequence if the sanctions are lifted from the Aeroflot. This suggestion was made more than a month ago during that meeting in Riyadh. So Americans heard our position, but we did not see any reciprocation from their side, any answer, any reply. Yesterday there was a meeting in Istanbul, something that you've already mentioned, where our experts reminded about this suggestion. But honestly, I did not have time to speak to them, so maybe some progress has been made in this regard, but I don't know about it yet. But we will continue to work on it because, once again, it's coming back to normalcy, all these steps. And a final question, please. Minister Lavrov, the European Union is saying that they are investing more than 10 billion euro in developing Trans-Caspian corridor, and experts, they are saying it's a competition to the north-south and east-west routes that Russia is investing so heavily in. So what are the risks for Russia, considering that this project is becoming more and more actively funded by the European Union? We discussed it yesterday with my Kazakhstani counterpart, and today we also spoke about this during the Foreign Minister's session, and in a few minutes we will have a meeting with the 5 Central Asian states foreign ministers. It's a Trans-Caspian international transport route that you've mentioned. No one has seen this 10 billion out of those that the European Union wants to have as part of these projects to bypass the Russian territory. And secondly, of course, it will cost more. If the European Union decides to invest, it will cost much more than the international transport corridor north-south and west-east. But we don't think that it would be something horrible if, like the Chinese proverb says, all the flowers should blossom. So all the projects to address the energy infrastructure, to ensure comfortable logistics infrastructure, we have no problem with it if it does not create for anyone. The north-south is at much more advanced stage. It's much more efficient from cost effectiveness point of view, but also from the point of view of using this transport corridor. It is much more efficient in the way that it could deliver cargo from the north to the south. And apart from the north-south transport corridor, and within this context and in parallel to this, there are other routes from north of Russia could reach the Indian Ocean and the Persian Gulf, and the seaports in Iran, in India. And these kind of transport infrastructure options, they are being discussed already in practical dimension as well. And the Trans-Caspian international transport route, some parts of it are already being used by Kazakhstan, for example, and we don't mind it. We have nothing against it if there is an understanding that no one is going to try to create any problems against the transcontinental projects that have already been launched. I mean, the north-south and east-west, west-east corridors. If this is it, then thank you very much. We are done.